we think of history, we picture neat timelines, dates, and names all lined up like stepping stones. But that's an illusion. The truth is, most of history is missing. Scrolls have burned to ash. Temples have crumbled into dust. Entire libraries have been wiped out by war, conquest, and even deliberate destruction. Whole civilizations rose and vanished without leaving more than a few fragments behind. Maybe a line carved into stone or a rumor in a dusty old chronicle. And between those fragments, silence. It's in that quiet place that the imagination stirs. What was written in the thousands of books that were burned? Who built the ancient structures that stretch across continents? What secrets still sit buried beneath our feet? And it isn't just lost texts. Sometimes it's centuries of history where the record almost goes dark. Other times, it's entire structures swallowed by earth or sand, erased so completely that even their existence is unknown. These aren't obscure details. They're whole chapters of our shared story gone. This won't be a straight lecture or a neat timeline. Think of it instead as a journey, one where we descend together into the earth and look at what's been carved beneath our feet. Some are small puzzles, like a single narrow passage. Others are sweeping mysteries, like entire cities hidden underground. So, wherever you are right now, sit back, relax, and feel free to let this play in the background. The visuals are here for context if you want them, but they're not necessary. You can just listen, follow along, and let the stories unfold. And to begin, we start not with a grand entrance, but with thousands of narrow passages carved beneath Bavaria. Strange tunnels barely wide enough to crawl through, older than any medieval castle. Were these the work of one culture, or echoes of something far more ancient? Let's descend. In the countryside of Bavaria, beneath farms and forests that look unchanged for centuries, there exists a network that archaeologists still can't fully explain. More than 2,000 tunnels, most barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, carved deliberately into bedrock. They're called Erdstalls, from the German words for earth and stable, though they were never used for livestock. Spread across Bavaria, Austria, and parts of the Czech Republic, they present a consistent pattern. Narrow passages, rarely more than 80 centimeters wide, sometimes as tight as 40 centimeters. Smooth walls carved through limestone or sandstone. Sudden drops called schlupfs, barely large enough to slide through on your stomach. Chambers that open unexpectedly, then narrow again, into passages leading nowhere. The first systematic study began in the 1990s, though farmers had been stumbling into them for generations. What emerged from the surveys was striking. These weren't random excavations. Despite appearing across hundreds of kilometers, they shared design features: low ceilings that force you to crawl, right-angle turns, chambers positioned at specific intervals. The consistency suggests a shared tradition, a pattern passed down and repeated. Dating them has proven difficult. Without organic material to test, and with centuries of soil disturbance, archaeologists rely on context. Most estimates place them in the medieval period, roughly between 1000 and 1300 AD. But some researchers argue they could be older, possibly originating with Celtic peoples, and then reused or expanded by later cultures. The truth is, we don't know. No medieval texts mention building them. No local records describe their purpose. They simply exist, thousands of them, carved by hands that left no explanation. The mystery deepens when you consider the effort involved. Carving even a short tunnel through solid rock with hand tools requires weeks of work. Some Erdstalls extend for 50 meters or more, with multiple chambers and connecting passages. Multiply that by 2,000 sites, and you're looking at an enormous investment of labor across generations. Yet the tunnels are remarkably impractical, too narrow for storage, too cramped for comfortable shelter, too complex for simple escape routes. Theories abound. Some scholars suggest they were refugees during invasions or raids, places where families could hide when enemies approached. Others argue they served ritual purposes, possibly connected to rebirth symbolism, crawling through the Earth's womb to emerge renewed. Local legends, collected in the 19th century, call them soul holes, pathways for spirits, or passages to the underworld. A few fringe theories claim they were part of a vast underground transportation network, though the passages are far too uncomfortable for regular travel. There are intriguing tidbits that complicate every explanation. Some Erdstalls show evidence of deliberate blocking, as if whoever used them wanted to seal them permanently. Others contain ventilation shafts that suggest extended occupation. A few have carvings or marks on the walls, symbols that haven't been deciphered, and the distribution pattern, clustered in certain regions but absent from others, hints at cultural boundaries we don't fully understand. Imagine crawling through one. The entrance, often hidden beneath a barn or covered by centuries of soil, opens into darkness. You descend, the walls pressing close on both sides. The passage turns, drops, narrows to the point where your shoulders barely fit. Then suddenly, a chamber, just large enough to sit upright. Then another passage leading deeper, until you're disoriented, unable to tell how far you've come or how much further the tunnel extends. So why did medieval Europeans, or perhaps cultures before them, carve thousands of tunnels too cramped for any practical use? Were these ritual passages, spaces where initiation rites took place in deliberate discomfort? Escape routes that prioritized concealment over comfort? Or something we haven't considered, a function so specific to their world that we lack the context to recognize it? From these narrow enigmas beneath Bavaria, we travel east to a place where underground wasn't just a passage, but an entire city. In Cappadocia, Turkey, tens of thousands once lived beneath the surface, and what they built there still defies easy explanation. In 1963, a man renovating his basement in Cappadocia knocked down a wall and discovered a room he didn't know existed. Behind that room was a tunnel. Behind that tunnel was another level, and behind that, an entire city carved from volcanic rock extending 85 meters underground. The discovery happened in Derinkuyu, a town whose name translates to deep well, though no one suspected just how deep the history beneath their feet actually went. The homeowner, startled by the void behind his wall, called authorities. When archaeologists arrived and began exploring, they realized they were looking at something extraordinary. Not a cellar, not a cistern, but the entrance to one of the ancient world's most ambitious underground constructions. Derinkuyu descends 18 stories into the earth. Only 8 levels have been excavated and opened to visitors, but those alone reveal a complexity that challenges assumptions about what ancient peoples could achieve. The city wasn't a crude network of caves. It was planned, organized, and engineered to sustain life completely cut off from the surface. Each level served specific functions. Near the top, stables for livestock, their floors still marked by grooves worn smooth by centuries of animals. Deeper, storage chambers for food and wine. their cool temperatures ideal for preservation. Further down, living quarters, kitchens identifiable by blackened ceilings where smoke once rose, chapels carved with Christian crosses. At the deepest excavated levels, a cruciform church and what appears to be a school or meeting hall, its benches carved directly from the rock walls. The infrastructure is what impresses modern engineers most. 52 ventilation shafts, some plunging the entire 85-meter depth, ensured air circulation even at the lowest levels. Wells brought water down from the surface, distributed through channels to each floor. Massive circular stone doors, weighing up to 500 kilograms each, could be rolled into place to seal tunnels from the inside. The doors only locked from within, suggesting the threat came from above, not below. At its peak, Derinkuyu could have housed 20,000 people, possibly more. Families with children, elderly, livestock, supplies, everything needed to sustain a population during extended stays underground. And Derinkuyu wasn't alone. Nearby Kaimakla, another underground city, lies just 9 kilometers away. Archaeologists have traced tunnels connecting them, suggesting a network that sprawled beneath the entire region. The question of origin has sparked scholarly debate for decades. The soft, volcanic tuff that makes up Cappadocia's bedrock is relatively easy to carve, but dating rock-cut structures remains challenging. Some researchers argue the earliest levels date to the Phrygians, around the 8th or 7th century BC. Others point to evidence of expansion during the Byzantine period, when Christian communities fled persecution. Still others suggest multiple cultures contributed, each generation digging deeper, adding levels until the city became the vast complex discovered in 1963. And yet, for all its sophistication, we don't know who started it. The deepest levels remain unexplored, sealed by collapsed passages or considered too unstable for excavation. What lies below the 8th floor is speculation. More chambers, more tunnels, perhaps evidence of even earlier construction, or nothing at all, the city's depth already fully mapped. The question lingers: who first carved these levels, and were they hiding from something or someone we've forgotten? While Derinkuyu's inhabitants may have sought refuge underground, other cultures across the ancient world dug for different reasons. In Rome, beneath the streets and monuments, there lies a shadow city of tombs that once held secrets even emperors wanted hidden. Rome above ground is a museum. Rome below ground is a labyrinth. Beneath the city stretch over 600 kilometers of tunnels, carved through soft volcanic rock. The catacombs, as they're known, were more than burial grounds. They were meeting places, shrines, and in times of persecution, sanctuaries. The scale is difficult to grasp. 600 kilometers is roughly the distance from Rome to Munich, all of it underground, winding beneath neighborhoods and roads, layered in some places 4 or 5 stories deep. Archaeologists have mapped more than 40 distinct catacomb complexes, each named for the saint or martyr buried there: San Callisto, San Sebastiano, Domitilla, Priscilla. Together, they're estimated to hold the remains of 6 million people. The earliest catacombs date to the 2nd century AD, when Rome's Christian and Jewish communities needed burial space, but faced restrictions on surface land. Roman law forbade burial within city walls, and cemetery plots were expensive. The solution was to dig down. Soft tufa stone allowed for relatively easy excavation, and once started, the tunnels could expand horizontally, branching into side passages and chambers. What began as practical necessity became something more. Early Christians transformed these passages into underground churches. Walls were carved with frescoes showing biblical scenes, saints, and symbols. The Good Shepherd, fish representing Christ, anchors signifying hope. In the catacombs of Priscilla, there's what may be the earliest known image of the Virgin Mary, painted in the 3rd century. At San Callisto, 9 early popes were buried in a crypt now called the Chapel of the Popes, its walls inscribed with Greek lettering. The passages themselves vary in width. Main corridors allow 2 people to walk side by side, though the ceiling is low enough to force most visitors to stoop. Side tunnels narrow to single file. Burial niches, called loculi, are carved into the walls in rows, stacked floor to ceiling. Originally, each would have been sealed with a stone slab or tiles, marked with the deceased's name. Many are empty now, disturbed by later relic hunters, or simply collapsed with age. There are fascinating tidbits that bring the catacombs to life. Some burial chambers show evidence of funeral meals, food remains, and pottery suggesting that families gathered underground to commemorate their dead. Gold glass medallions, embedded in plaster seals, depicted portraits of the deceased or Christian symbols. Graffiti scratched into walls by early pilgrims records prayers and requests for intercession from saints buried nearby. But much remains unexplored. Sections of the catacombs collapsed centuries ago. Others flooded or filled with debris. Modern excavation is cautious, limited by concerns about stability and preservation. The frescoes, protected by darkness and stable temperature for nearly 2 millennia, deteriorate rapidly when exposed to light and air. Since the 1960s, many catacombs have been closed to the public except for small, guided groups. The Jewish catacombs present their own mysteries. Villa Torlonia contains 2 separate complexes, their walls carved with menorahs, shofars, and Hebrew inscriptions. Dating primarily to the 3rd and 4th centuries, they preserve a community's presence in Rome that predated Christianity. Unlike Christian catacombs, they received less attention from medieval pilgrims and Renaissance scholars, leaving them more intact but also less documented. How many chambers remain sealed, and what early Christian practices or texts might still be preserved in sections we haven't mapped? Rome's catacombs preserved the memory of early Christians in stone and art. But halfway across the world, beneath the jungles of Central America, the Maya carved tunnels for purposes far more mysterious, passages to the underworld itself. To the ancient Maya, caves weren't just geological formations. They were portals, entrances to Xibalba, the place of fear, where the lords of death dwelled, and beneath the pyramids and plazas of sites like Chichen Itza and Tikal, archaeologists have found elaborate tunnel systems carved to mirror the mythological journey into the underworld. The connection between caves and the sacred runs deep in Maya cosmology. The Popol Vuh, the Quiche Maya creation text, recorded in the 16th century, describes Xibalba as a subterranean realm reached through cave entrances. Hero twins descend through darkness, face trials set by death gods, and ultimately triumph, their journey symbolizing cycles of death and rebirth. For the Maya, caves were literal thresholds between the world of the living and the realm of ancestors and deities. Evidence of this belief appears across the Maya world. At Chichen Itza, beneath the famous El Castillo Pyramid, a natural cave system was discovered in the 1930s and largely forgotten until 2015, when archaeologists confirmed its extent. The cenote, or sinkhole, at the site's center served as a natural entrance to the underworld. Excavations of the sacred cenote recovered human remains, jade, gold, and pottery thrown in as offerings, gifts sent to the gods below. Balancanche, cave just east of Chichen Itza, reveals how the Maya transformed natural formations into ritual spaces. Deep within, archaeologists found offerings left untouched for over 1,000 years. Incense burners shaped like the rain god, Chak, ceramic vessels, and ritual implements arranged around a natural column that resembles a sacred ceiba tree. The Maya symbol of the cosmic axis connecting heaven, earth, and underworld. At Tikal, recent LiDAR surveys revealed previously unknown tunnels beneath Temple Lon and other major structures. Some appear to be natural caves modified and expanded. Others show evidence of deliberate excavation, passages carved to connect surface temples with subterranean chambers. The discovery suggests Tikal's layout incorporated underground elements in ways earlier excavations missed. The debate among scholars centers on function. Were these tunnels primarily practical infrastructure, water management systems that also gained religious significance? Or were they designed from the start as physical manifestations of cosmological belief? The answer likely varies by site and time period. Some caves clearly served both purposes, channeling water while also functioning as pilgrimage destinations where rituals took place. There's evidence of bloodletting ceremonies performed deep underground. Stingray spines and obsidian blades recovered from cave deposits match implements used in royal blood sacrifice. Cave paintings show figures in elaborate headdresses, possibly priests or rulers, engaged in ritual acts. The darkness, the descent, the confined spaces would have heightened the psychological and spiritual impact of such ceremonies. Without the Popol Vuh and other colonial-era texts that recorded Maya beliefs, we'd struggle to interpret these underground spaces. The physical evidence, human remains, and offerings in caves becomes comprehensible only when paired with the mythology. The tunnels weren't simply carved, they were theology made tangible, beliefs about death and rebirth expressed through engineering and architecture that brought worshippers into direct contact with the forces they believed governed existence. Were these tunnels practical infrastructure that gained religious meaning, or were they deliberately designed as physical manifestations of myth? Perhaps the distinction itself is modern. For the Maya, water and the sacred weren't separate categories. A tunnel that channeled rain could simultaneously serve as a passage to Xibalba, each drop of water a connection between surface and underworld, between life-giving moisture and the realm of ancestors. The Maya tunneled to reach their gods, but in the deserts of the Middle East, another ancient people carved underground for survival itself. In Jordan's desert, the Nabateans created water systems so sophisticated they could sustain thousands in one of Earth's harshest landscapes. Petra is famous for its treasury carved into a cliff face. But the real marvel lies beneath your feet. The Nabateans, who built Petra 2,000 years ago, created an underground hydraulic network so advanced that fountains flowed in the desert and tens of thousands could live where nothing should survive. Petra sits in one of the driest regions on Earth. Annual rainfall averages less than 15 centimeters, concentrated in brief winter storms. Surface water is scarce, temperatures extreme. Yet at its height, between the 1st century BC and 2nd century AD, Petra supported a population estimated at 20,000 to 30,000 people. The city thrived as a crossroads of trade routes, its markets supplied by caravans carrying frankincense, myrrh, spices, and silk. That level of urban density in such an arid environment required engineering that went far beyond simple wells. The Nabateans carved channels directly into cliff faces, some so narrow and subtle that modern visitors walk past them without noticing. These channels collected runoff from rare rainstorms, directing every drop toward collection points. Picture standing in the Siq, the narrow gorge leading to the treasury, and looking up. Along the rock walls, carved channels run parallel to your path, nearly invisible until sunlight catches their edges. They're part of a system that funneled water from kilometers away into the city's core. Beneath the streets and plazas, hundreds of cisterns were cut into bedrock. Some are small, holding a few thousand liters. Others are vast chambers capable of storing hundreds of thousands of liters. The cisterns weren't simply holes in the ground. Many incorporated settling basins, separate chambers where sediment could drop out before water flowed into main storage. This kept the water cleaner and prevented the cisterns from filling with silt. The Nabateans also used ceramic pipes, sections of terracotta fitted together and sealed. These pipes ran underground, protected from evaporation and contamination. At key points, the system included distribution tanks where water pressure could be regulated, allowing it to flow upward to fountains and higher elevations. Roman visitors remarked on Petra's fountains, astonished to see water flowing freely in a desert city. Recent archaeological surveys using drones and ground-penetrating radar suggest the system is even more extensive than previously mapped. Channels buried under centuries of sediment are being traced. Cisterns that appeared isolated turn out to be connected through underground passages. Modern estimates of total storage capacity run into the millions of liters, though the full extent remains unknown. And yet much of Petra's hydraulic infrastructure is still being discovered. Excavations focus understandably on the monumental tombs and temples, leaving underground water systems partially explored. Some cisterns remain buried, their locations known only from surface depressions or faint traces in old surveys. The channels carved into remote canyons, far from tourist paths, have received minimal study. The system's sophistication becomes clear when compared to Roman aqueducts of the same period. Romans built massive above-ground structures to transport water across distances. The Nabateans achieved similar results through subtler means, carving channels that work with the landscape rather than dominating it. Their approach required understanding hydrology, rock mechanics, and the specific challenges of desert environments. Petra's decline in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD correlates with earthquake damage. Several major quakes struck the region, and while the monuments above ground show obvious cracks and collapsed sections, the underground systems likely suffered too. Broken pipes, collapsed cisterns, blocked channels. Without constant maintenance, the network would have degraded quickly. As Petra's population dwindled, the knowledge of how to repair and operate the system may have been lost. How much of Petra's system remains hidden beneath landslides and sediment? And could new technology reveal an even more extensive network? While the Nabateans engineered underground for water, other cultures dug for defense. In Vietnam's Cu Chi district, a network of tunnels became one of the most effective military installations in history and revealed techniques ancient peoples may have used for similar purposes. During the Vietnam War, American soldiers faced an enemy that could disappear into the earth. The Cu Chi tunnels, stretching over 250 kilometers beneath the jungle northwest of Saigon, weren't just trenches. They were an underground city with hospitals, kitchens, sleeping chambers, and even theaters. Proof that humans have always known how to thrive beneath the surface when necessity demands it. The tunnels began not during the American War, as the Vietnamese call it, but decades earlier. In the 1940s, during resistance against French colonial forces, Vietnamese fighters dug the first passages. Simple at first, narrow escape routes and hiding spots. As conflict intensified, the network expanded. By the 1960s, Cu Chi had evolved into a vast subterranean complex serving entire battalions. At its most developed, the system operated on 3 levels. The first, shallowest tier, sat just a few meters below ground, used for quick access and emergency exits. The second level, around 6 meters deep, housed living quarters and storage. The third level, reaching 12 meters in some areas, contained command centers and workshops where weapons were repaired and even manufactured. Vertical shafts connected the levels, allowing fighters to move between depths depending on threat level above. The infrastructure rivaled small towns. Kitchens were positioned beneath termite mounds, their smoke vented through the mounds to disguise it as insect activity. Wells tapped into groundwater, providing drinking water without surfacing. Meeting halls large enough for groups of 50 were carved from clay. Even a field hospital operated underground, performing surgeries by lamplight in chambers reinforced against collapse. Entrances were masterworks of concealment. Trapdoors covered in leaves matched the jungle floor perfectly. Some were built inside bomb craters, places American forces assumed had already been searched. Others opened beneath water, accessible only by diving through streams or flooded depressions. The tunnels themselves were deliberately narrow, sized for the smaller Vietnamese build, making it difficult for larger American soldiers to pursue. But Cu Chi wasn't an innovation. It was an application of principles Vietnamese fighters had used for centuries. Historical records describe tunnel networks used during Chinese occupation periods, resistance fighters in earlier dynasties, using underground passages for guerrilla warfare. The techniques, passed down through generations, were adapted and expanded to meet modern threats. Archaeology reveals similar defensive tunnels across Vietnam dating back much further. Bronze Age sites show evidence of concealed passages. Iron Age settlements incorporated underground chambers as part of their fortification strategies. The practice of digging for defense runs deep in Vietnamese culture, suggesting that what happened at Cu Chi was less invention and more refinement of ancient knowledge. American forces eventually developed tactics to counter the tunnels. Specialized tunnel rats, small-statured soldiers, would descend with pistols and flashlights to clear chambers. Chemical agents were pumped into discovered openings. Bombing campaigns targeted suspected tunnel areas. Despite these efforts, the network remained operational throughout the war, a testament to both its extent and the determination of those who maintained it. Today, preserved sections of Cu Chi are tourist attractions. Visitors can crawl through widened passages, see reconstructed living quarters, watch demonstrations of trapdoor concealment. The experience offers glimpses of what underground life required, though the modern tourist tunnels are sanitized versions, enlarged for comfort and equipped with electric lighting. Q-Chi proves what ancient peoples knew. When threatened, humans don't just retreat, we dig. And the principles used here echo tunnel systems carved thousands of years earlier. From wartime necessity, we return to mysteries carved long before recorded history. In Malta, beneath temples older than the pyramids, there lies a hypogeum, a carved labyrinth that has sparked theories ranging from acoustic wonders to prehistoric sound experiments. In 1902, workers cutting a cistern in Malta broke through into a chamber they weren't supposed to find. Beneath their feet lay the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, a 3-story temple carved from living rock around 3300 BC. What makes it extraordinary isn't just its age, older than Stonehenge, older than most megalithic structures in Europe. It's what happens when you speak inside. The hypogeum descends 10.6 meters below the surface in 3 distinct levels. The upper level, closest to ground, consists of natural caves modified and enlarged. The middle level shows more deliberate architecture, chambers with carved doorways and walls smoothed into curves. The lower level is the most impressive, entirely excavated from solid limestone. Its rooms connected by passages that required removing thousands of tons of rock using only stone and bone tools. What the Neolithic builders created was both burial site and temple. Archaeologists excavating in the early 20th century found the remains of more than 7,000 individuals, their bones stacked inside chambers. Grave goods included pottery, beads, and small carved figurines, some depicting extremely corpulent figures whose meaning remains debated. Red ochre paintings survive on some ceiling sections, spirals and geometric patterns that echo designs found in Malta's above-ground megalithic temples. But the oracle room on the middle level presents the real mystery. It's a small chamber, roughly rectangular, with a carved niche in one wall. When someone speaks into this niche at a specific pitch, the entire room resonates. Modern acoustic studies have measured the effect. Sound at around 110 Hz produces the strongest resonance, vibrations powerful enough that you can feel them in your chest and skull. Research into the effects of 110 Hz on the human brain suggests something intriguing. Studies using EEG monitoring show that exposure to this frequency can alter brain activity, shifting patterns in ways that might induce trance-like states. Whether Malta's Neolithic builders understood this effect is speculation, but the precision of the carving suggests purpose. The oracle room wasn't a natural formation. Every surface was shaped, every dimension deliberate. There are intriguing tidbits that complicate simple explanations. Other chambers in the hypogeum also show acoustic properties, though less pronounced. The layout suggests movement through spaces, processions perhaps, with the oracle room as a focal point. If the hypogeum served primarily as a tomb, why carve a chamber specifically designed for sound? If it was a temple, why bury thousands within it? Access to the hypogeum is now severely restricted. After damage from moisture and carbon dioxide caused by tourist breath, UNESCO and Maltese authorities limit visitors to small groups on carefully scheduled tours. Large sections remain closed entirely. The lower level especially is fragile, its carved surfaces showing erosion from decades of exposure after millennia of preservation in stable conditions. The connection to Malta's above-ground megalithic temples is clear but not fully understood. Tarxian Hagar Kim, and other temple complexes were built by the same culture during roughly the same period. They share architectural elements, decorative motifs, and evidence of ritual use. But the Hypogeum stands apart as the only major underground structure, suggesting it held special significance in their cosmology. Were Malta's ancient builders aware of the acoustic properties, deliberately creating a space where sound itself became a tool for ritual or altered states? Malta's Hypogeum suggests ancient peoples understood properties of underground spaces we're only now rediscovering. But in China, beneath the tomb of the first emperor, lies something even more ambitious, a necropolis that may hold liquid mercury rivers and treasures that have never seen daylight. In 1974, farmers digging a well near Xi'an uncovered fragments of terracotta. That discovery led to one of archaeology's greatest finds: 8,000 life-sized warriors guarding the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor. But those warriors stand outside the tomb itself, a massive sealed mound that Chinese authorities refuse to excavate, protecting secrets buried for 2,200 years. The tomb complex sprawls across 56 square kilometers. The mound at its center rises 76 meters above the surrounding plain, a man-made mountain covering what historical texts describe as an underground palace. Sima Qian, writing a century after Qin Shi Huang's death in 210 BC, provided the only detailed account. According to his records of the Grand Historian, workers dug down to groundwater level and poured bronze to create the foundation. Above this, they constructed a palace with halls and chambers representing the empire. The description grows more elaborate. Sima Qian claims the ceiling was decorated with pearls to represent celestial bodies, stars and constellations mapped overhead. Below, a scale model of the empire showed its rivers and seas, with mercury flowing through channels to simulate water. Crossbows were positioned to fire automatically at anyone who breached the tomb. The account reads like fantasy, an ancient historian's exaggeration to glorify an emperor's ambitions. Except modern testing suggests parts of it might be true. Soil samples taken from the mound show unusually high mercury concentrations, far above natural background levels. Chemical analysis confirms the mercury isn't from recent contamination. It's been there for millennia, seeping upward through soil from something beneath. If mercury was indeed used to create rivers in the tomb, the quantities involved would be enormous, potentially hundreds of tons. The terracotta warriors themselves testify to the scale of the project. Each figure is unique, with individual facial features, hairstyles, and expressions. They were mass-produced yet personalized, created in an assembly line that still allowed for variation. Infantry, archers, cavalry, generals, all arranged in battle formation facing east, ready to defend their emperor in death. And they're merely the outermost guardians. 3 massive pits hold them, but they're positioned more than a kilometer from the tomb mound itself. Ground-penetrating radar and remote sensing have revealed additional structures. Foundations of buildings appear in scans, possible administrative complexes or ceremonial halls. Anomalies in the data suggest voids, chambers that might be intact or might be collapsed. Without excavation, interpretation remains guesswork. The technology can detect differences in density but can't show what fills the spaces. Chinese authorities have been explicit about their decision. Excavation would expose organic materials to air and light, accelerating decay. The terracotta warriors, when first unearthed, bore traces of paint, bright colors that faded within minutes of exposure. Modern preservation techniques have improved, but not enough to guarantee the tomb's contents would survive opening. Better to leave it sealed than risk destroying what 2,000 years of darkness has preserved. There's also political calculation. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang is a national treasure, its mystique enhanced by remaining unopened. Once excavated, it becomes a site of known dimensions, its contents catalogued and displayed. The mystery ends. For now, the decision is to wait, trusting future technology will offer better options than what's available today. What lies beneath that mound? A palace as described in ancient texts, complete with rivers of mercury and a ceiling of stars. Or has time and water destroyed what 700,000 workers spent decades building? While China protects its emperor's secrets underground, other subterranean mysteries weren't sealed deliberately. They were simply forgotten. In Scotland, across the Orkney Islands, Stone Age peoples created underground chambers so well hidden that we're still finding them today. On the windswept Orkney Islands off Scotland's northern coast, Stone Age peoples didn't just build above ground. They carved elaborate chambers into hillsides and beneath the earth, creating spaces for the dead, and possibly the living, that predate the pyramids by centuries. And with every storm that erodes the coast, new chambers emerge from the earth. The most famous is Meishou, a chambered cairn built around 3000 BC. From the outside, it appears as a grass-covered mound, roughly 35 meters in diameter and 7 meters high. The entrance, a low stone passage barely a meter high, forces visitors to crawl or stoop. This passage extends 9 meters into the mound, then opens into a central chamber tall enough to stand in. 4 massive stone slabs form the walls, each weighing several tons. The roof is corbelled, stones laid in overlapping courses that gradually close toward the center, a technique requiring precise engineering to prevent collapse. What makes Meishou remarkable is its astronomical alignment. For approximately 3 weeks around the winter solstice, the setting sun shines directly down the entrance passage, illuminating the back wall of the chamber. The alignment is precise, calculated to mark the year's shortest days. Whether this served religious, calendrical, or symbolic purposes remains debated, but the intentionality is clear. Neolithic architects designed this chamber to capture light at a specific moment in the annual cycle. The chamber held burials originally, though most remains were removed in antiquity. What survived intact until the 19th century were later additions. In the 12th century, Vikings broke into Meishou and left graffiti carved in runic script. The inscriptions are surprisingly mundane. Some boast about treasure supposedly taken from the mound. Others are simple names, medieval visitors marking their presence. One reads, "Ingigirth is the most beautiful of all women," carved beside a rough drawing. The contrast is striking. A 5,000-year-old tomb defaced by medieval graffiti that itself is now historically significant. Meishou isn't alone. Across Orkney, more than 70 chambered cairns have been identified. Quantinus, on the mainland, contained the remains of over 150 individuals, suggesting communal burial practices that spanned generations. Whiteford Hill, smaller and simpler in design, shows evidence of multiple construction phases, as if later peoples expanded or modified earlier work. Each site differs in detail, but shares common elements: stone construction, underground chambers, and apparent ritual significance. The purpose remains a subject of scholarly debate. Were these purely tombs, final resting places for community leaders or entire populations? Or did they serve multiple functions, as temples or gathering places where the living came to commune with ancestors? Some chambers show evidence of fires, suggesting ceremonies performed inside. Others contain artifacts beyond grave goods, pottery and tools that hint at activities beyond burial. Recent discoveries add to the picture. Coastal erosion, accelerated by stronger storms, regularly exposes new chambers. In 2023, a farmer in South Ronaldsay noticed stones protruding from a cliff face after winter gales. Investigation revealed another chambered structure, previously unknown, its entrance sealed by centuries of accumulated soil. Similar finds occur every few years, each adding to the catalogue of Neolithic Orkney's underground architecture. The islands were clearly a centre of Stone Age activity. Above-ground sites like Skara Brae, the standing stones of Stennis, and the Ring of Brodgar demonstrate a sophisticated culture with advanced construction techniques. The underground chambers fit into this larger complex, part of a landscape designed to integrate the living, the dead, and the cosmos in ways we're still working to understand. Why did Neolithic Orkney peoples invest such effort in underground chambers? And how many more lie beneath pastures and cliffs, waiting for the next storm to reveal them? From Scotland's Stone Age underworld, we descend deeper into European prehistory. Beneath France's Dordogne region, caves hold not just geological wonders, but humanity's earliest art, and tunnels explored by Paleolithic peoples for reasons we're still trying to understand. In 1940, 4 teenagers and a dog stumbled into a cave in southwestern France. What they found, hundreds of meters from the entrance in complete darkness, were paintings of bulls, horses, and deer created 17,000 years ago. The Lascaux cave proved that Paleolithic humans didn't just shelter in cave mouths. They ventured deep into the earth, creating art in chambers that required torchlight to reach and view. The discovery happened by accident, as many significant archaeological finds do. The teenagers were exploring woods near Montignac when their dog disappeared down a hole. Following him, they found themselves sliding into a passage that opened into a vast chamber. Once their eyes adjusted, the walls came alive. Hundreds of animals painted in red ochre, black charcoal, and yellow pigments covered every surface. Aurochs, the extinct wild cattle that once roamed Ice Age Europe, dominated the main hall, their bodies rendered in such detail that individual muscles are visible. Lascaux became famous quickly, perhaps too famous. Within years, it was open to tourists. By the 1950s, thousands visited annually, their breath and body heat creating condensation that threatened the paintings. Algae and bacteria began growing on the walls. In 1963, French authorities closed the original cave permanently, creating a replica nearby for visitors. The paintings themselves, protected by millennia of stable darkness, had begun deteriorating within decades of exposure. But Lascaux isn't unique. Across France and northern Spain, more than 350 decorated caves have been discovered. Chauvet Cave, found in 1994 in the Ardèche region, contains paintings radiocarbon dated to 32,000 years ago, nearly twice Lascaux's age. The sophistication is startling. Artists used shading to create three-dimensional effects, employed the cave wall's natural contours to give animals volume, and even depicted movement through sequential images. The mystery is why they painted so deep. Many decorated chambers lie hundreds of meters from cave entrances, through narrow passages, past underground lakes, in spaces that require deliberate navigation. Getting there with Paleolithic technology meant carrying torches or fat lamps, crawling through tight spaces, and risking getting lost. Evidence of their passage remains. Torch marks streak across ceilings where flames once burned. Holes in walls show where poles were inserted to create scaffolding for reaching high surfaces. Some caves preserve footprints in soft clay floors. At Chauvet, a child's footprints appear alongside an adult's, suggesting these deep ventures weren't restricted to initiated specialists. Families or groups traveled together into darkness to witness or create art. At Neo Cave in the Pyrenees, footprints showed children running, playing perhaps, hundreds of meters underground. Theories about purpose range widely. Some researchers argue these were shamanic sites, places where altered states of consciousness were induced through sensory deprivation and darkness. Others suggest coming-of-age ceremonies, rituals where adolescents were brought deep into the earth as part of initiation. Still others propose the caves were sanctuaries, sacred spaces where the barrier between the living world and the spirit realm grew thin. The evidence for ritual use is compelling. Many painted chambers have unusual acoustics, spots where sound resonates or echoes in distinctive ways. Some researchers believe certain locations were chosen specifically for their acoustic properties, making them ideal for ceremonies involving chanting or music. Flutes carved from bone have been found in cave contexts, suggesting sound was indeed part of these underground experiences. Or drew Paleolithic peoples into deep darkness to create art no one could see without effort. The question reveals assumptions. Perhaps the art wasn't meant to be seen easily. Perhaps the journey, the descent into Earth's depths, the disorientation and darkness was central to whatever these spaces meant. The paintings might have been destinations or markers along a path whose real significance lay in the experience of reaching them. Lascaux's artists ventured underground with purpose, even if we can't fully grasp it. But in Turkey's Göbekli Tepe region, recent discoveries suggest that some of humanity's earliest temples may have underground components we haven't fully explored, chambers that predate agriculture itself. Göbekli Tepe rewrote history when it was discovered in the 1990s, a temple complex from 9600 BC, built before pottery, before agriculture, before civilization as we knew it. But as excavation continues, archaeologists are finding something unexpected: chambers and passages carved in the bedrock beneath the famous stone circles, suggesting the complex extends underground in ways we're only beginning to map. The site sits on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey, overlooking the Harran Plain. For decades, local farmers knew about the stones protruding from the ground, but assumed they were part of an old cemetery. When German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began systematic excavation in 1994, he realized the stones weren't markers, but massive T-shaped pillars arranged in circles, some weighing 16 tons and standing over 5 meters tall. The pillars bear carvings of animals, foxes, lions, scorpions, snakes, rendered with surprising detail for a people supposedly just emerging from the hunter-gatherer stage. No evidence of permanent settlement has been found at Göbekli Tepe. No houses, no hearths for cooking, no storage facilities. Instead, the site appears to have been purely ceremonial, a place where scattered groups gathered periodically to build, worship, and feast before dispersing again, Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in the 2010s revealed anomalies beneath the excavated enclosures. The readings suggest voids, possible chambers carved into the limestone bedrock that supports the megaliths above. Initial excavation of some areas confirmed the radar findings. Beneath several of the stone circles, passages descend into carved chambers. Their purpose isn't clear from the limited exploration conducted so far. The chambers aren't large or elaborate. Most are small rooms, barely big enough for a few people, with walls showing tool marks from stone implements. Some contain niches carved into walls, empty now but possibly once holding offerings or ritual objects. Others appear to connect through short tunnels, creating a modest underground network beneath the temple enclosures. What makes this significant is the context. Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years, and the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000. It was built by people who, according to conventional timelines, should have been focused on survival, following game, gathering wild plants. Yet they organized labor on a massive scale, quarried and transported multi-ton stones, and carved both surface monuments and underground chambers with apparent ritual purpose. Only about 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. The site covers roughly 90,000 square meters, and most of it remains buried beneath soil and vegetation. Surveys indicate at least 20 stone circles exist, with only a handful exposed so far. If the excavated circles have underground components, it's reasonable to assume unexcavated ones might as well. Recent work at nearby Karahan Tepe, another pre-pottery Neolithic site discovered in 1997 but only seriously excavated starting in 2019, shows similar patterns. Stone pillars above ground, chambers carved into bedrock below. The presence of underground elements at multiple sites suggests this was a regional architectural tradition, not an isolated experiment. The mystery deepens when considering the effort involved. Carving chambers from solid limestone using stone tools requires significant time and labor. Why would pre-agricultural peoples invest resources not just in monumental surface structures, but also in underground works that few would see? What lies beneath the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe? And why would pre-agricultural peoples dig chambers beneath their already monumental temple? While Göbekli Tepe's underground remains largely unexplored, other ancient sites reveal their subterranean secrets more readily. In Egypt, beneath the Giza Plateau, a network of tunnels and chambers suggests the pyramids above were only part of a much larger complex. The Great Pyramid of Giza is built on a plateau, honeycombed with passages. Some are known, like the subterranean chamber beneath the pyramid itself, carved from bedrock 30 meters below the base. Others are rumored, whispered about in explorer accounts and architectural surveys. And recent technology is revealing that the network beneath Giza may be far more extensive than we ever imagined. The subterranean chamber was part of the original pyramid design, though it was never finished. Accessed through the descending passage that drops from the pyramid's north face, it sits carved directly from the limestone bedrock. The chamber is rough, unpolished, showing chisel marks, but none of the smooth finishing found in the upper chambers. A pit in the floor suggests excavation that was abandoned, though whether this was intentional or represents a change in plan remains debated. Beyond the documented chambers, the plateau holds other underground structures. The Osiris shaft, discovered in the 1930s, but not fully explored until the late 1990s, by Zahi Hawass, descends nearly 30 meters beneath the causeway connecting the second pyramid to its valley temple. At the bottom lies a chamber containing a granite sarcophagus surrounded by water. The shaft dates to the Site period, around 600 BC, much later than the pyramids themselves. But its presence indicates the plateau was seen as significant for underground construction across multiple dynasties. Natural caves beneath the plateau complicate the picture. Limestone naturally forms cavities through water erosion over millennia. Ancient Egyptians were aware of these caves and in some cases modified them, enlarging chambers or carving passages to connect separate cavities. The distinction between natural and artificial becomes blurred when natural caves have been worked by human hands. Ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic surveys conducted in recent decades have detected additional anomalies. The 2017 Scan Pyramids project, using muon tomography and thermal imaging, identified a large void above the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid. While this void is within the pyramid structure rather than beneath it, the discovery prompted renewed interest in what else might be hidden. Similar surveys of the bedrock beneath the pyramids show density variations that could indicate chambers, passages, or simply natural geological features. Egyptian mythology ties the underground to the afterlife journey. The Book of the Dead describes the deceased descending through the underworld, passing through gates and chambers before reaching judgment. Some scholars suggest the subterranean chambers beneath pyramids weren't practical spaces, but symbolic representations of this journey, carved into bedrock to connect the monument with the realm below. 19th century explorers left accounts that are difficult to verify today. Some claimed to have found passages extending far beneath the plateau, connecting pyramids or leading to chambers never officially documented. These reports are treated skeptically, often dismissed as exaggeration or confusion in an era before systematic archaeology. Yet the problem is that many areas beneath Giza remain inaccessible or unexplored, making it impossible to definitively rule out such passages. Access to areas beneath the plateau is tightly controlled by Egyptian authorities. Excavation requires extensive permissions, and much of the bedrock investigation focuses on preservation and monitoring rather than new exploration. Ground-penetrating radar can detect anomalies, but can't determine their nature without physical investigation. How extensive is the network beneath Giza? And why did ancient Egyptians carve chambers deep into bedrock beneath their monuments to the sky? Egypt's pyramids may hide subterranean secrets, but in the Americas, entire complexes were designed to be partially underground. At Mexico's Teotihuacan, recent discoveries show the city's layout incorporated caves and tunnels in ways that fundamentally shaped its sacred architecture. In 2003, heavy rains caused a sinkhole at the base of Teotihuacan's Temple of the Feathered Serpent. When archaeologists descended, they found a tunnel sealed for 100 years. At its end, 18 meters below the pyramid, lay chambers filled with offerings. Proof that Teotihuacan's builders didn't just construct above ground. They created a sacred underworld to mirror their cosmic beliefs. The discovery happened by chance, as groundwater drainage revealed their entrance. Initial investigations using a small robot equipped with cameras showed the tunnel extending more than 100 meters, heading directly toward the center of the pyramid. Full excavation began in 2009 and took 6 years to complete. What archaeologists found was extraordinary even by Teotihuacan standards. The tunnel wasn't natural, though it began as a cave. Ancient engineers had modified it extensively, widening passages, carving chambers, reinforcing walls with stone blocks. The floor had been deliberately smoothed and in some sections paved. The tunnel descended gradually, ending in a cruciform chamber at the deepest point. 3 side chambers branched off, each carved with precision. The offerings tell the story of ritual importance. More than 50,000 objects were catalogued from the tunnel and chambers. Jade figurines, ceramic vessels, obsidian blades, animal bones, and shells imported from both the Pacific and Gulf coasts. But the most striking find was liquid mercury. Pools of it collected in chambers. Mercury held sacred significance in Mesoamerican cultures, possibly representing water or the underworld itself. The quantities found at Teotihuacan, multiple kilograms, represent a massive investment, as mercury had to be extracted from cinnabar through heating. The tunnel was sealed deliberately around 200 to 250 AD, near the height of Teotihuacan's power. Workers filled it entirely with rubble and soil, burying the offerings and chambers. The sealing wasn't a collapse or accident. It was intentional closure, perhaps marking the end of a ritual cycle or the completion of the pyramid's sacred activation. Creation mythology in Mesoamerica places great emphasis on caves as birthplaces of gods and humanity. The Aztecs, who arrived at Teotihuacan centuries after its abandonment and named it the place where the gods were created, believed their deities emerged from caves beneath pyramids. The tunnel beneath the temple of the feathered serpent fits this pattern perfectly, a physical embodiment of the mythological cave from which life and divine power emanated. Surveys beneath other Teotihuacan structures suggest similar tunnels may exist. Ground-penetrating radar has detected anomalies beneath the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, voids that could represent chambers or passages. Without excavation, confirmation is impossible, but the pattern at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent suggests Teotihuacan's architects incorporated underground elements systematically. The deliberate sealing raises questions about meaning. If the tunnels were important enough to construct and fill with offerings, why close them? One possibility is that the act of sealing completed the ritual, making the pyramid a living entity by trapping sacred power within. Another is that access to these underworlds was meant to be permanent, the tunnels serving their purpose through existence rather than ongoing use. Teotihuacan's tunnels were sealed deliberately, preserving their secrets. But not all ancient underground works were so carefully closed. In Bolivia, at Tiwanaku, subterranean chambers and passages remain partially explored, their connection to the site's mysterious decline still debated. At 12,500 feet above sea level in Bolivia, the ruins of Tiwanaku puzzle archaeologists. This was once a city of perhaps 400,000, thriving between 500 and 1000 AD. Its temples and gates are famous. But beneath the surface lies something equally impressive, a system of underground channels and chambers that scholars debate were either sophisticated engineering or ritual architecture, and possibly both. The most visible underground element is the Templo Semisubterraneo, the sunken temple. Unlike most subterranean structures discussed so far, this one isn't fully enclosed. It sits as a courtyard, carved below ground level, its walls lined with 64 stone pillars and numerous carved stone faces set into the walls. Visitors descend steps to reach the floor, approximately 2 meters below the surrounding plaza. At the center stands a stela, a carved monolith depicting what may be a deity or ruler. The temple's position below ground wasn't purely aesthetic. Water management at high altitude presents unique challenges. Rainfall is seasonal, temperatures drop below freezing regularly, and the thin air makes everything more difficult. Tiwanaku's builders created an extensive network of underground channels that collected rainwater, distributed it across agricultural terraces, and prevented flooding of structures. The channels show sophisticated understanding of hydraulics, with precise gradients that ensured water flowed where intended without erosion. But calling these channels purely functional misses something. Many connect to ceremonial spaces in ways that suggest intentional integration of water and ritual. The sunken temple, for instance, sits at a low point where channels converge. During rainy season, water would have flowed around and possibly through the structure, creating a space where architecture, water, and ceremony intersected. Aymara culture, which has roots in the Tiwanaku civilization, treats water as sacred. Springs, lakes, and underground water sources are sites of offerings and prayers. The cosmology links underground water with Pachamama, the Earth Mother, and with agricultural fertility. If Tiwanaku's people held similar beliefs, then separating drainage channels from ritual architecture becomes anachronistic. The channels were both simultaneously. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected additional underground structures that haven't been excavated. Anomalies beneath plazas and around major monuments suggest chambers or passages. Excavation at Tiwanaku proceeds slowly due to limited funding and the site's fragility. The high altitude means fewer working hours per day for excavators, and the ancient structures are vulnerable to the freeze-thaw cycles that have already damaged much of the surface architecture. Some researchers argue the underground channels incorporate astronomical alignments. Certain passages align with solstice sunrises or the rising of particular stars. If accurate, this would strengthen the case for ritual purpose, though skeptics note that finding alignments in complex architectural sites often reflects selective interpretation rather than original intent. The decline of Tiwanaku around 1000 AD coincides with evidence of environmental stress. Drought reduced Lake Titicaca's levels, and agricultural productivity declined. If the underground channel system was designed for specific rainfall patterns, climate change could have rendered it ineffective. Channels that once prevented flooding might have run dry. Ritual spaces tied to water abundance would have lost their meaning when water became scarce. Did Tiwanaku's underground channels serve purely practical purposes, or were they designed to merge engineering with cosmology in ways we haven't recognized? While Tiwanaku's purpose remains debated, other underground systems present different mysteries. In North America, beneath the Mississippi River Valley, a network of tunnels carved into soft rock has sparked theories ranging from ancient mining to pre-Columbian civilizations. In 1982, an Illinois man named Russell Burroughs claimed he stumbled into a cave system containing thousands of carved stones, Egyptian-style hieroglyphs, and artifacts suggesting ancient Old World contact with North America. The archaeological establishment dismissed it as an elaborate hoax, but the tunnels themselves exist, carved through bedrock, and the debate over who made them and when continues. Burroughs never revealed the cave's exact location, Citing fears of looting and vandalism, he released photographs of artifacts, stone tablets covered in what appeared to be a mix of Egyptian, Phoenician, and Celtic symbols. The stones showed varying levels of craftsmanship, some quite sophisticated, others crude. Within years, similar stones appeared in collector markets across the Midwest, their authenticity hotly contested. Academic archaeologists were unanimous in their skepticism. The inscriptions didn't match known ancient scripts closely enough to be genuine. The mix of cultural elements seemed designed to appeal to popular theories about pre-Columbian contact rather than representing any coherent ancient tradition. Chemical analysis of some stones suggested modern carving, and the lack of controlled excavation meant provenance couldn't be established. Most damning, Burroughs himself had a history that raised questions about credibility. Yet the core claim about tunnels in southern Illinois isn't fabricated. The region does contain carved underground passages. Soft limestone and sandstone formations allowed early miners, both prehistoric and historic, to extract materials. Some tunnels date to Native American copper mining operations that extended across the Great Lakes region. Archaeological evidence confirms indigenous peoples mined copper from Lake Superior deposits for thousands of years, creating underground workings in the process. The question isn't whether tunnels exist beneath parts of Illinois and Missouri, but when they were made and by whom. Some are clearly historic, dug during 19th century mining operations. Others may be older, possibly prehistoric mining sites that have since collapsed or been forgotten. Distinguishing between them requires careful archaeological investigation, which Burroughs Cave never received. Burroughs Cave fits a pattern of archaeological controversies in the American Midwest. The Kensington Runestone, the Michigan Tablets, the Newark Holy Stones, all purported evidence of pre-Columbian European contact, all dismissed by mainstream archaeology as hoaxes. The region's geology, with its soft stone suitable for carving, combined with a 19th century interest in proving Old World origins for Native American cultures, created an environment where such frauds flourished. Still, genuine prehistoric mining sites do exist and deserve study. In Michigan's Upper Peninsula, ancient copper mines show evidence of exploitation dating back 7,000 years. Stone hammers, fire-cracked rock, and excavated pits demonstrate sophisticated mining techniques. Some of these sites include tunnel systems, though they're modest compared to the elaborate caves described by Burroughs. Whether Burroughs Cave is an elaborate fraud or something more complex, it reminds us that genuine tunnel systems do exist beneath North America, carved by peoples whose full story we're still piecing together. From controversial claims in Illinois, we turn to tunnels whose ancient origin is undisputed. In the Andes, at Chavin de Huanta in Peru, a system of underground galleries dates back 3,000 years and incorporates acoustic engineering that rivals anything built in the ancient world. Deep in Peru's Andes, at 10,000 feet elevation, lies Chavin de Huanta, a temple complex from 1200 BC that pioneered underground architecture. Beneath its plaza stretches a labyrinth of stone galleries, deliberately designed to channel sound, water, and air in ways that would have created otherworldly sensory experiences for ancient pilgrims. The site served as a major ceremonial center during Peru's early Horizon period, roughly 1200 to 500 BC. Surface structures include platforms, plazas, and the old temple, a U-shaped building that forms the public face of the complex. But the real innovation lies beneath. The galleries snake through the interior of the temple platform, narrow stone corridors connecting chambers at different levels, creating a three-dimensional maze accessible only through specific entrances. At the heart of this labyrinth stands the Lanzon, a granite monolith nearly 5 meters tall, carved with the image of a fanged deity. The name means great spear or lance, describing its blade-like shape. The Lanzon occupies a cruciform chamber where multiple galleries converge, positioning it as the literal and symbolic center of the underground network. Pilgrims approaching through dark, twisting passages would have encountered this deity in a moment of revelation as their path opened into the chamber. The acoustic properties weren't accidental. Modern studies using sound equipment have demonstrated that the galleries amplify and transform noise. Frequencies around 280 Hz resonate particularly well, and the narrow passages create echoing effects that make it difficult to determine sound direction or origin. Water flowing through stone channels carved into gallery floors adds constant background noise, a rushing that would have been audible throughout the underground spaces. But the most dramatic acoustic element involves Strombus shell trumpets. These large marine shells, imported from the Pacific coast 100 kilometers away, can produce deep, resonant tones when blown correctly. Archaeologists have found numerous Strombus shells at Chavin, some showing modification for use as instruments. When blown inside the galleries, the sound reverberates, amplified by stone walls and distorted by echoes until it becomes a roar that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Ventilation shafts add another layer to the sensory experience. These vertical passages, some reaching from the lowest galleries up through the temple platform to open air, create airflow that would have produced sound when wind passed through them. Some shafts are precisely sized to create specific tones, functioning as enormous stone flutes played by wind rather than breath. Imagine descending into these galleries as a pilgrim. Darkness presses in, relieved only by torches that create flickering shadows. Water rushes somewhere below or beside you. Air moves unpredictably, sometimes still, sometimes gusting. Then someone in an unseen chamber blows a Strombus trumpet. The sound floods the passages, seeming to emanate from the stone itself, impossible to locate, overwhelming. The architecture at Chavin shows remarkable sophistication. Stones are fitted without mortar, their surfaces shaped to interlock. Despite the region's seismic activity, the galleries have remained stable for 3 millennia. The precision required to create both structural integrity and specific acoustic properties demonstrates advanced engineering knowledge. Did Chavin's architects deliberately design an underground experience to overwhelm the senses, creating altered states of consciousness through sound, darkness, and carefully controlled airflow? Chavin's underground was designed for ritual, but in Cappadocia, beyond the famous Derinkuyu, dozens of other underground cities remain barely explored, each raising questions about how common it once was to live beneath the earth. Derinkuyu is famous, but it's not alone. Across Cappadocia, archaeologists have identified more than 36 underground cities carved from volcanic tuff. Some are small, housing a few hundred. Others rival Derinkuyu in scale, and most remain largely unexplored, their histories unknown, their builders anonymous. Kaymaklı, the second largest, sits just 5 kilometers from Derinkuyu, excavated to 8 floors, though surveys suggest it may extend deeper. Kaymakla could have housed 3,000 to 5,000 people. Its layout differs from Derinkuyu, with wider passages and lower ceilings, suggesting different construction priorities, or perhaps different uses. Storage chambers dominate the upper levels. Deeper down, living quarters, kitchens, and a church carved with a cross indicate Christian use during the Byzantine period. The connection between Kaymakli and Derinkuyu isn't just proximity. A tunnel links them, running 9 kilometers through bedrock. When fully mapped, it proved to be wide enough for people to move between cities while remaining underground. This raises the possibility that Cappadocia's underground cities weren't isolated refugees, but nodes in a subterranean network, allowing movement across the region without surfacing. Other sites add to the pattern. Özkonak, discovered in 1972, features an unusual defensive element: holes in passage ceilings through which defenders could pour hot oil on intruders. Mazı, one of the oldest identified cities, shows construction techniques that may predate others, with cruder carving and less sophisticated ventilation. Özluç, only partially excavated, reveals multiple building phases, evidence of expansion and modification over centuries. Dating these cities remains problematic. The soft volcanic tuff doesn't lend itself to radiocarbon dating, and organic material suitable for testing is rare in underground contexts. Archaeologists rely on pottery styles, architectural features, and comparative analysis. Most estimates place initial construction somewhere between the 8th and 7th centuries BC, possibly by Phrygians fleeing invasions. Later cultures, Christians fleeing Roman persecution, Byzantines defending against Arab raids, expanded and modified the existing structures. The result is archaeological palimpsest, cities showing multiple cultural layers. A chamber carved by Phrygians might have been enlarged by early Christians, then modified again by Byzantines, each group adapting the space to their needs. Separating these layers requires careful excavation, which has only occurred at a handful of sites. Most of Cappadocia's underground cities remain less than half explored. Lower levels are often collapsed, flooded, or filled with debris. Modern safety concerns limit how much excavation can occur without extensive structural reinforcement, and the region's ongoing use, houses, farms, roads, complicates access to many sites. The sheer number of cities suggests underground living was more common than we typically imagine. These weren't emergency shelters used occasionally. The infrastructure, sophistication, and interconnection point to communities that regularly used underground spaces, perhaps seasonally or during specific threat periods, but with frequency enough to justify massive ongoing construction and maintenance. How many more underground cities lie beneath Cappadocia's plains? And why did culture after culture choose to expand these subterranean networks rather than build anew above ground? While Cappadocia's builders may have sought protection underground, other ancient peoples dug tunnels for stranger purposes. In England, the Royston Cave presents one of archaeology's oddest mysteries: medieval carvings in an underground chamber with no clear origin or function. In 1742, workers in the English town of Royston discovered a bell-shaped chamber carved into chalk 8 meters below the surface. Its walls were covered floor to ceiling with medieval carvings, saints, crucifixions, mysterious symbols. No one knows who carved it, why, or how long it had been sealed before its rediscovery. The discovery happened during construction work in the town centre. Workers digging post holes broke through into a void. Lowering a boy down with a candle, they found a circular chamber, roughly 5 meters in diameter, shaped like an inverted bell. The walls, carved from the soft chalk bedrock, bore images from floor to ceiling. What stunned investigators was that the chamber appeared to have been completely sealed, filled with earth and rubble, its location forgotten until the accidental breach. The carvings themselves present a puzzle. Religious imagery dominates. Saint Christopher carrying the Christ child, Saint Catherine with her wheel, various crucifixion scenes. But mixed among these are more enigmatic symbols, geometric patterns, what might be architectural representations, figures that don't clearly match known saints. The carving style varies, suggesting either multiple hands or work done over an extended period. Dating the carvings relies on stylistic analysis rather than scientific methods. The imagery and techniques point to the 13th or 14th centuries, placing them in the high medieval period. This aligns with the presence of an Augustinian priory in Royston during that era, which might explain religious imagery. But the priory's records make no mention of the cave, and its purpose remains unexplained. Theories have accumulated over the centuries. One popular idea links the cave to the Knights Templar, the military order suppressed in the early 14th century. Royston sat on a major medieval road, and the Templars maintain a presence in the region. Some researchers point to symbols they interpret as Templar iconography, though mainstream historians remain skeptical. Without documentary evidence connecting the cave to the order, the theory remains speculative. Another possibility is that Augustinian monks carved the cave as a private chapel or meditation space. The religious imagery supports this interpretation. Yet the lack of any mention in monastic records is strange. Churches and chapels were typically documented, their construction and consecration recorded. A chamber of this size and elaboration going unmentioned seems unlikely. The most significant loss to scholarship happened before preservation efforts began. When first discovered, the cave's lower half was filled with debris. Workers clearing this material damaged or destroyed many carvings before anyone recognized their historical value. What remains is estimated to be only about half of the original work, with the lower walls largely blank or showing only fragmentary traces of images. Modern visitors enter through a street-level building constructed specifically to provide access. The chamber is lit electrically, making the carvings visible, though the original experience would have been by candlelight, shadows flickering across chalk walls. Who carved an entire chamber beneath Royston, decorated it with religious imagery, then sealed it so completely that even local memory forgot it existed? Royston's mystery is contained in a single chamber, but in Scotland, a vast network of tunnels suggests coordinated underground construction on a regional scale, and nobody knows who built them or when. Across the Scottish Highlands and Islands, more than 200 stone-lined underground passages have been discovered. Called souterrains, they date roughly to the Iron Age, but predate written records in the region. Were they storage chambers, refuges, or something ritual? Archaeologists still debate. The term souterrain comes from French, meaning underground, though the structures themselves are distinctly Scottish and Irish. They consist of stone-lined passages, typically curving rather than straight, with walls built from carefully fitted stones and roofs created through corbelling or large capstones. Most are modest in length, 10 to 20 meters, though some extend significantly further. Many have side chambers branching off the main passage. Construction dates to roughly 400 BC through 400 AD, spanning the late Iron Age and into the Roman period in Britain, though Roman influence barely reached Scotland's northern regions. The souterrains were built by communities that left little other archaeological trace beyond settlement foundations and agricultural remains. Without written records from the builders themselves, interpreting purpose relies entirely on physical evidence and comparison to similar structures elsewhere. Several well-preserved examples demonstrate the range. Crichton Mains in Mid Lothian features a curving passage with side cells, all stone-lined with corbelled roofs intact. Ardesti in Angus shows evidence of deliberate infilling, the passage packed with stones and earth in antiquity. The care taken in construction is evident. Walls are skillfully built, drainage considered, and in some cases, the passages show signs of plastering or smoothing. What puzzles researchers is the minimal artifact recovery from souterrains. If these were storage chambers for grain or goods, evidence of such use should appear in the archaeological record. But excavations typically find little beyond basic pottery shards and occasional animal bones. The absence of substantial deposits argues against purely practical storage function. Some scholars propose souterrains served as refugees during raids or conflicts. The narrow passages could be easily defended, and families might hide underground temporarily. Yet many souterrains connect to surface settlements with no apparent defensive features, undermining the refuge theory. If defense was paramount, why not fortify the settlement itself? Ritual or ceremonial purpose represents another interpretation. The effort invested in construction, the deliberate curving of passages, and the eventual filling in suggest activities beyond mundane storage. Some souterrains align with notable landscape features or celestial events, though whether these alignments are intentional remains contested. The pattern of deliberate backfilling is particularly striking. Many souterrains show evidence of careful, complete filling with stone and earth. This wasn't collapse or abandonment. It was intentional closure, as if the structures served their purpose and were then ritually or practically decommissioned. The timing of backfilling varies by site, with some filled soon after construction and others remaining open for generations before closure. Similar structures exist in Ireland, called by the same term, though showing regional variations. The cross-cultural presence suggests souterrains represented a widespread Iron Age tradition across the Celtic world. Whether the tradition originated in one region and spread, or arose independently in multiple areas, remains unknown. Why did Iron Age Scots dig hundreds of underground chambers across their landscape, use them for a period, then deliberately fill them in? The answer likely varies by site and time period, with some serving practical needs, others ritual purposes, and many, perhaps, blending both in ways our modern categories struggle to capture. Scotland's souterrains remain enigmatic, but they're part of a broader European pattern. From Britain to the Mediterranean, Bronze and Iron Age peoples showed a consistent interest in creating underground spaces, suggesting these weren't isolated experiments, but a widespread cultural practice. In Cornwall, At the southwestern tip of Britain, a different type of underground structure appears. Locally called fogus, they're similar to Scotland's souterrains, but subtly different, longer, more elaborate, often with side chambers. And like their northern cousins, nobody knows what they were really for. The word fogu comes from Cornish, the Celtic language once spoken in the region, meaning cave or underground chamber. But these aren't natural caves. They're entirely artificial, carved through earth and bedrock, lined with carefully placed stones. Cornwall has roughly 10 well-preserved fogus, each associated with Iron Age settlements that flourished between 500 BC and 400 AD. Carnahuni, one of the most accessible, shows the typical pattern. A stone-lined passage extends about 20 meters underground, curving gently as it descends. Midway along, a circular side chamber opens off the main passage, its corbelled roof still intact after 2 millennia. The village above ground, excavated in the 20th century, reveals houses, courtyards, and evidence of sustained occupation. The fogu sits integrated into the settlement, its entrance accessible from the village centre. Halligie, near the Lizard Peninsula, represents the largest known fogu. Its main passage runs nearly 27 meters, with multiple side chambers and a sophisticated drainage system. The construction shows remarkable skill. Massive capstones support the roof, some weighing several tons, positioned to distribute weight evenly. Even after centuries of neglect and partial collapse, the structure remains substantially intact. What distinguishes fogus from souterrains isn't just size. The Cornish examples tend to have more elaborate side chambers, better drainage, and in several cases, evidence of reuse extending into the medieval period. Some fogus show modifications suggesting different uses over their lifespans, with passages blocked or reopened, chambers added or subdivided. Recent acoustic studies have added an intriguing dimension. Researchers testing sound properties in Carnahuni and Halligie found that certain frequencies resonate particularly well within the chambers. Whether this was intentional, a byproduct of the chamber shapes, or simply coincidental remains debated. But the discovery has prompted new questions about whether fogus might have served ritual functions involving sound, chanting, or musical performance. Temperature provides another clue to possible function. Fogus maintain constant cool temperatures year-round, typically around 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. This makes them ideal for storage of perishable goods. Yet, like the souterrains, fogus yield minimal archaeological evidence of stored materials. The absence of grain residues, preserved foods, or storage vessels argues against this being their primary purpose. The deliberate integration with settlements suggests fogus weren't hidden refugees, but accepted parts of community infrastructure. Entrances often lie in prominent positions, easily accessed rather than concealed. If defense was the goal, this openness seems counterproductive. Evidence of medieval reuse at some sites complicates interpretation. Later, peoples clearly found the fogus useful for something, maintaining access and in some cases, modifying the structures. Christian crosses carved into stones at certain fogus indicate religious reappropriation, though whether this reflected original sacred use or represented new sanctification of pagan spaces is unclear. Were fogus practical structures whose purpose is obvious but forgotten? Or did they serve roles, perhaps acoustic, ritual, or astronomical, that left no written record? From Cornwall's mysteries, we travel to the Mediterranean, where Malta offers not just the hypogeum, but an entire network of underground cart ruts and chambers that suggest island-wide engineering on a scale that seems impossible for the Neolithic era. Malta is crossed by thousands of parallel grooves carved into bedrock. They look like cart ruts, and they're called that, but they present problems. Some run off cliffs into the sea, others lead nowhere, and some connect to underground chambers. Dating from the Bronze Age or earlier, they form a network that seems too extensive and too purposeful to be simple roads. The ruts appear across Malta and its sister island Gozo, carved into limestone surfaces at varying depths. Most consist of parallel pairs, roughly 1.4 meters apart, suggesting wheeled vehicles or sledges with standardized track width. The grooves themselves range from 10 to 60 centimeters deep, worn smooth by whatever passed through them repeatedly over long periods. Mizra Gar Ilkbir, nicknamed Clapham Junction by British archaeologists for its complexity, shows the full puzzle. Here, dozens of rut pairs intersect, diverge, and run parallel across a limestone plateau. Some tracks cross each other at different depths, indicating they weren't all in use simultaneously, but were created over extended time periods. The site looks like a Bronze Age railway junction, though no one can explain where the tracks were going or what they were carrying. The sea presents the biggest mystery. At multiple coastal locations, ruts continue off cliff edges or run down into the water, suggesting either the island's geography has changed since they were made, or their purpose wasn't what we assume. If Malta's coastline was different during the Bronze Age, with the island larger or shaped differently, some ruts now underwater might have led to settlements or quarries since submerged. But dating sea level changes precisely enough to confirm this remains challenging. Some ruts lead to or from underground quarries, stone extraction sites where Bronze Age Maltese cut building blocks for their megalithic temples. This connection suggests a practical transportation function, moving heavy stones from quarry to construction site. The ruts could have been created by wooden sledges or wheeled carts dragging stones, gradually wearing grooves into the limestone. Experiments have shown that repeated passage of loaded sledges can create rut-like grooves in soft stone over time. Yet this explanation doesn't account for all features. Why do some ruts lead nowhere useful? Why carve grooves so deep when shallower marks would suffice for guidance? And why, at certain sites, do the ruts align with astronomical features or connect to underground chambers that don't appear to be quarries? Theories multiply. Some researchers argue the ruts were water channels, part of an island-wide irrigation or drainage system. Others suggest ritual pathways, ceremonial routes connecting sacred sites. A few propose the ruts served multiple purposes over their long period of use, beginning as practical transport routes and later acquiring religious significance. The connection to Malta's megalithic temple culture is clear, but not fully understood. The temples, dating from 3600 to 2500 BC, required transporting massive stones. The cart ruts could represent the infrastructure that made temple construction possible. Yet some ruts appear to post-date the temples, suggesting continued use or new purposes after the temple-building culture declined. What system required such extensive carved pathways across Malta? And why would Bronze Age peoples invest such effort into creating routes that seem to defy practical explanation? Malta's cart ruts may have served purposes lost to time, but in Jerusalem, tunnels serve as living archaeology, systems built layer upon layer by different civilizations, each adapting and expanding what came before. Beneath Jerusalem's old city, layers of history descend for stories. First Temple period tunnels connect to Second Temple passages. Roman sewers intersect with Crusader tunnels. And beneath them all, Canaanite water systems cut through bedrock. It's archaeology in 3 dimensions, where new discoveries happen regularly. The most famous tunnel dates to 701 BC. Hezekiah's tunnel, carved through 533 meters of solid rock, brought water from the Gihon spring outside Jerusalem's walls to the pool of Siloam inside the city. The feat was accomplished by 2 teams working from opposite ends, meeting in the middle with remarkable precision. An inscription discovered in the tunnel in 1880 describes the moment when workers heard each other's pickaxes through the rock and adjusted their paths to connect. The inscription is now in Istanbul's Archaeology Museum, but the tunnel remains functional, still channeling water after 2,700 years. Warren Shaft, named for the 19th century British explorer who documented it, presents a more contentious mystery. This vertical shaft descends into a natural cave system that provided Jerusalem's earliest water access. For decades, it was believed to be Jebusite, created by the city's pre-Israelite inhabitants. Recent archaeological work suggests it may actually date to the Iron Age, or even later, challenging long-held assumptions about Jerusalem's early water supply. The debate continues, with scholars examining tool marks and construction techniques to establish chronology. The Western Wall tunnels, excavated systematically since the 1960s, run along the base of the Temple Mount platform. Originally, these weren't tunnels at all, but open streets during the Second Temple period. Later construction, particularly during the Ottoman era, built over them, creating the underground passageways that exist today. Walking through them reveals different layers: Herodian stones from the 1st century BC, Roman additions, Byzantine modifications, and medieval vaulting. There are intriguing tidbits in the drainage channel running beneath Jerusalem's main street. Dating to the 1st century AD, this massive sewer allowed people to walk upright beneath the city. Archaeologists found coins, pottery, and other artifacts dropped or washed into it during Jerusalem's destruction in 70 AD. Some researchers believe residents used the drainage channel to escape when the Romans breached the walls, hiding underground before fleeing the city. Excavation of the channel continues, slowly revealing its full extent. Recent discoveries add new complexity. In 2023, archaeologists working beneath Wilson's Arch, a bridge that once led to the Temple Mount, uncovered what appears to be a small theatre or council chamber from the Roman period. The find was unexpected, revealing that even heavily studied areas still hide structures. Medieval crusaders added their own layers, constructing passages beneath churches and fortifications. Some of these connected to older systems, reusing Roman or earlier tunnels. Ottoman builders did the same, incorporating ancient foundations into newer construction. The result is a vertical maze where determining which civilization built what requires careful analysis of construction techniques, materials, and stratigraphy. The political sensitivity of excavation beneath Jerusalem complicates archaeological work. The city is sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, with religious sites stacked literally on top of each other. Any excavation near holy places requires navigating competing religious and political claims. Some tunnels remain off-limits, their contents speculated about but unverified. How many more tunnels lie beneath Jerusalem, sealed or forgotten by one civilization, waiting for the next excavation to reveal them? Jerusalem's tunnels were built and rebuilt across millennia, but in Japan, some underground structures seem to have sprung up fully formed. Massive carved chambers whose precision raises questions about the tools and methods available to their Bronze Age creators. In a quarry near Takasago, Japan, sits Ishi no Hoden, a massive rectangular monolith carved from living rock, but never finished or removed. It weighs an estimated 600 tons, stands 6.5 meters tall, and floats in water that collects beneath it. Local legends call it ancient, but archaeologists struggle to date it or explain its purpose. The stone appears as if someone began carving a massive rectangular block, creating vertical cuts on all sides, then stopped before extraction. The dimensions are precise: 6.45 meters high, 5.45 meters wide, and 5.7 meters deep. The cuts are clean, showing careful work rather than rough quarrying. Yet whoever started never finished, leaving the block attached to bedrock below, while water from natural springs pools underneath, creating the illusion that the monolith floats. The site has long been considered sacred. A small Shinto shrine stands beside the monolith, and local worship practices extend back centuries, though how far is unclear. The water beneath is central to the site's spiritual significance, believed to have purifying properties. Pilgrims and visitors still come to see what locals call the Stone of the Treasure Hall, though the name's origin and meaning have been lost. Dating presents significant challenges. Without organic material to test, and with centuries of weathering, archaeologists rely on comparative analysis and historical context. The most common estimate places it in the Kofun period, roughly 300 to 710 AD, when Japan saw widespread construction of elaborate stone tombs for elite rulers. The precision of the cutting and the scale match capabilities demonstrated at Kofun burial sites elsewhere in the region. But some researchers argue for greater antiquity, suggesting the work could predate the Kofun period by centuries. Tool marks visible on the stone don't definitively match known implements from any specific period. The controversy stems partly from limited comparable examples. No other unfinished monoliths of this scale exist in Japan to provide clear context. The precision raises questions about technology. The cuts are remarkably straight and flat, creating surfaces that meet at right angles. Achieving this with bronze or iron tools of the Kofun period would require considerable skill and time. Some observers have suggested the precision indicates techniques we haven't fully recognized in ancient Japanese stoneworking, possibly involving careful heating and cooling to fracture rock along desired lines. The purpose remains speculative. One theory links it to tomb construction. The Kofun period saw massive stone chambers built for burial, and this could represent a failed attempt to create a monolithic burial vault or marker. The decision to abandon the project might reflect discovery of structural flaws in the stone, logistical impossibility of moving such weight, or simply a change in plans or priorities. Another interpretation emphasizes the religious context. Perhaps the stone was never meant to be moved. The act of carving itself might have been ritual, creating a sacred object through partial extraction, leaving it connected to earth while surrounded by water. In this view, abandonment wasn't failure, but completion according to a purpose we no longer understand. Who attempted to carve a 600-ton block from bedrock in ancient Japan? Why did they stop? And what tools could have achieved such precision? Ishi no Hoden's carvers left their work unfinished. But in Australia, Aboriginal peoples completed elaborate underground works across the continent. Systems of tunnels and chambers that colonial accounts documented, but modern archaeology struggles to find. In 19th century Australian colonial records, settlers occasionally described extensive tunnel systems they attributed to Aboriginal peoples, elaborate networks through soft stone, sometimes connecting settlements. Modern archaeology has verified some Aboriginal underground mining and shelter use, but many of the tunnels described in old accounts have never been relocated. The verified evidence is substantial enough to confirm capability. Cunalda Cave on the Nullarbor Plain shows Aboriginal flint mining extending back at least 22,000 years, possibly earlier. Deep underground chambers show finger markings on walls where miners extracted flint, and stone tools recovered from excavations demonstrate sophisticated underground work over millennia. The cave system extends for kilometers, with evidence of deliberate exploration and resource extraction far from any entrance. Wilkie Mere in Western Australia represents another confirmed site. This ochre mine, still considered sacred by Wajari people, contains underground galleries carved through rock to reach red ochre deposits. Traditional knowledge indicates the mine was used for thousands of years. An archaeological investigation supports continuous exploitation extending back at least 27,000 years. The galleries show evidence of fire setting, a mining technique where rock is heated, then cooled rapidly to cause fracturing, making excavation easier. But these verified sites don't match the scale of some colonial descriptions. Accounts from the 1800s mention tunnel networks extending for considerable distances, passages connecting different areas, and underground spaces large enough for groups to shelter. When modern archaeologists attempt to locate these described tunnels, many cannot be found. Some may have collapsed. Others might have been misidentified natural caves, and many likely were destroyed during the 19th and 20th centuries by mining operations, agricultural development, and urban expansion. The scale of destruction is difficult to quantify. Australia's mineral wealth meant intensive mining across regions where Aboriginal peoples had lived for tens of thousands of years. Open-cut mines obliterated surface and subsurface features alike. Towns and farms were built without archaeological surveys. By the time systematic archaeology began documenting Aboriginal sites in the mid-20th century, enormous areas had been irreversibly altered. Cultural protocols add another dimension. Many Aboriginal underground sites are sacred, their locations and details restricted knowledge not freely shared with outsiders. Archaeologists working with Indigenous communities must navigate complex permissions and respect restrictions that limit what can be disclosed publicly. This means some tunnel systems may exist but remain undocumented in academic literature, protected by traditional owners who prefer sites, remain unknown to the broader public. Rock art inside some mining tunnels demonstrates that underground spaces held significance beyond resource extraction. At Cunalda, engravings on chamber walls suggest ceremonial use alongside practical mining. The darkness, the descent into earth, and the effort required to reach deep chambers parallel patterns seen in sacred caves worldwide, where difficulty of access enhances spiritual significance. The colonial accounts, unreliable as they may be in specifics, point toward a broader truth. Aboriginal peoples engaged with underground spaces in ways that went beyond simple shelter. Whether all described tunnels existed as reported is doubtful, but the verified sites prove both technological capability and cultural motivation for underground engineering. Australia's tunnel story is complicated by lost records and destroyed sites. But in New Zealand, Maori legends speak of underground passages and chambers, and modern investigations are finding that some of these stories may have archaeological basis. Maori oral tradition speaks of ana, underground refuges where people hid during times of conflict. Some stories describe elaborate chambers and connecting passages. For generations, European settlers dismissed these as legends, but archaeological investigations are finding that at least some of the ana were real, carved during periods of intense intertribal warfare. The word ana translates simply as cave, though it encompasses both natural caves and modified or constructed underground spaces. Traditional accounts describe ana used during pre-contact warfare, places where entire groups could shelter when enemies raided. Later, during the musket wars of the 1800s, when the introduction of firearms dramatically escalated conflict, underground refuges became even more crucial for survival. Distinguishing between natural caves used as refuges and deliberately constructed underground chambers requires careful investigation. New Zealand's volcanic geology created numerous lava tubes and limestone caves that Maori peoples adapted for shelter. In the Waitomo region, famous for its caves, evidence shows long-term human use, including food storage, tool caches, and defensive modifications to natural formations. But some sites show evidence of deliberate construction beyond simple adaptation. In certain areas of the North Island, underground chambers appear carved or excavated rather than naturally formed. Stone-lined passages, modified entrances, and artificial ventilation features suggest engineering rather than opportunistic use of existing geology. These are the sites that align most closely with oral traditions describing purpose-built ana. Archaeological verification requires sensitivity to cultural protocols. Many potential ana sites are wahitapu, sacred places where investigation requires permission from iwi, the tribal groups holding traditional authority over the land. Some iwi have welcomed archaeological study, seeing it as validation of oral history. Others prefer sites remain undisturbed, their locations protected as part of living cultural knowledge rather than academic data. Recent surveys conducted in partnership with Maori communities have confirmed several underground refuges. Sites in the Bay of Plenty and Taranaki regions show modification consistent with defensive use. Stone walls blocking natural cave entrances, carved niches for storing supplies, and evidence of long-term occupation all support the oral traditions. Dating these modifications remains challenging, but artifact associations and comparative analysis suggest use during the pre-contact period and intensification during the Musket Wars. The Musket Wars, spanning roughly 1807 to 1842, transformed Maori warfare. The introduction of European weapons made traditional pia fortifications more vulnerable, increasing the value of concealed refugees. Some ana may have been constructed or expanded specifically in response to this new threat, representing adaptation to rapidly changing circumstances. Traditional knowledge, preserve details that archaeology confirms. Elders describe specific features, water sources within refugees, multiple exits for escape, concealed entrances, that match physical evidence at verified sites. This convergence of oral and physical evidence strengthens both, demonstrating that traditional accounts, while not always literal, often preserve accurate information about past practices. How many of the underground refugees described in Maori tradition actually existed? And how do we balance archaeological investigation with respect for cultural knowledge? New Zealand's ANA served defensive purposes, but in Bolivia's Altiplano, underground structures at sites like Pumapunku show engineering that seems to transcend practical function, precision that has inspired alternative theories about ancient technology. At Pumapunku, part of the Tiwanaku complex in Bolivia, stone blocks show a level of precision that puzzles engineers. Some underground chambers feature walls with perfectly flat surfaces and drill holes that appear machined. The site dates to around 500 to 600 AD, yet the accuracy of the stonework rivals modern manufacturing tolerances. The name Pumapunku translates as Door of the Puma in Aymara. It sits at 12,800 feet above sea level, part of the larger ceremonial complex that includes Tiwanaku's main temple area. What distinguishes Pumapunku are the megalithic stones scattered across the site, some weighing over 130 tons, carved from andesite and diorite, extremely hard volcanic rocks that resist conventional stoneworking tools. The famous H-blocks demonstrate the precision most dramatically. These stones, shaped like the letter H in profile, feature perfectly smooth surfaces and right-angle corners that meet with minimal deviation. Measurements show flatness within millimeters across meter-long surfaces. The blocks interlock using complex joinery, with grooves and projections fitting together in ways that suggest modular construction techniques. Underground chambers at the site show similar precision. Walls cut into bedrock display flat surfaces and straight edges. In some areas, drill holes penetrate the stone in parallel lines, their depths uniform, their diameters consistent. The holes suggest some form of drilling technology, though what tools could have created them in such hard stone remains debated. Mainstream archaeology attributes the work to advanced stoneworking techniques developed over generations. Experiments have demonstrated that bronze tools, combined with abrasive sands and patient labor, can achieve remarkable precision. The Tiwanaku culture clearly possessed sophisticated engineering knowledge, as evidenced by their water management systems and architectural accomplishments. From this perspective, Pumapunku represents the pinnacle of their capabilities rather than evidence of anomalous technology. Alternative theories argue the precision exceeds what Bronze Age tools should achieve. Proponents point to the hardness of andesite and diorite, the consistency of measurements across multiple stones, and the apparent modular design suggesting prefabrication on a scale unusual for ancient cultures. Some claim the site demonstrates lost advanced technology or even extraterrestrial intervention, though these ideas lack support in the archaeological community. The challenge lies in verifying precision claims. Many measurements cited in alternative literature haven't been independently confirmed under controlled conditions. When archaeologists conduct systematic analysis, they often find the precision, while impressive, falls within achievable ranges for skilled craftspeople with time and appropriate tools. The blocks are remarkable, but not impossible. The site's current state complicates assessment. Pumapunku was extensively looted during Spanish colonial period and later. Stones were quarried for building materials. Others moved or toppled, disrupting original arrangements. What appears as scattered chaos may once have been organized structures. Without knowing the original configuration, determining the full extent of the builder's achievements becomes speculative. Did Tiwanaku's builders possess stoneworking techniques we've underestimated? Or is the precision at Pumapunku evidence of something more surprising about ancient capabilities? Pumapunku's precision is debated, but the underground chambers are real. In China, a different kind of underground mystery presents itself. The Longyu Caves, massive artificial caverns carved from solid rock with no historical record of their creation. In 1992, a farmer in China's Zhejiang province began pumping water from a pond. As the water drained, stone walls emerged, then columns, then an entire carved cavern the size of a cathedral. It was the first of 36 massive underground chambers discovered at Longyu, halls carved from solid siltstone, and there's no mention of them in any historical record. The discovery site, near the village of Longyu, had been known locally simply as bottomless ponds. No one suspected what lay beneath the water. As pumping revealed the first chamber's scale, officials called in archaeologists. What they found defied expectations. Not a single large cave, but a complex of artificial caverns, each excavated entirely by hand. The largest chamber measures roughly 30 meters tall and covers about 4,000 square meters. Stone columns, left uncut to support the ceiling, show chisel marks in consistent patterns. The walls bear decorative ridging, parallel grooves carved across surfaces apparently for aesthetic effect rather than structural necessity. The precision suggests organized planning and skilled execution, not haphazard excavation. Scale becomes clear when considering what's missing. Excavating these chambers required removing nearly 1 million cubic meters of rock. That volume represents thousands of cartloads if moved manually, requiring coordination of labor on a massive scale over extended time. Yet no historical documents describe this project. Chinese records from the period are extensive, covering imperial projects, local construction, even minor administrative details. An undertaking of this magnitude should appear somewhere. It doesn't. Dating presents challenges. The chambers themselves can't be radiocarbon dated. Stylistic analysis of the carving techniques and comparison with other sites suggest the work dates to approximately 2,200 years ago, possibly during the Qin or early Han dynasties. But without definitive evidence, the dates remain estimates. Some researchers argue for earlier construction, others for later. The purpose is equally mysterious. Were these quarries, with stone extracted for construction elsewhere? Disarm decorative elements argue against purely functional quarrying. The regular patterns carved into walls and the preservation of support columns show aesthetic consideration unusual for industrial sites. Storage facilities. The chambers would provide stable temperature and humidity, suitable for preserving goods. But again, no evidence of stored materials has been found, and the decorative elements seem excessive for warehouses. Religious or ceremonial use represents another possibility. The chamber's cathedral-like proportions and the care taken in their execution suggest spaces meant to impress, but no altars, inscriptions, or religious iconography have been identified. If these were temples or ritual spaces, they left no obvious markers of that function. The flooding adds its own mystery. At some point after their creation, the chambers filled with water. Was this intentional, a way to seal or protect them? Or did it happen gradually as groundwater levels changed? The water preserved the chambers from weathering and human interference, keeping them hidden until 1992. But it also destroyed or removed any organic materials that might have provided dating evidence or clues to purpose. Only 24 of the 36 identified chambers have been excavated and open to visitors. The others remain flooded or unexplored. Each excavated chamber reveals similar features: tall spaces, support columns, carved walls, and that same enigmatic absence of identifying marks or historical reference. How did ancient Chinese workers carve 1 million cubic meters of rock without leaving any written record? And what was important enough to justify such an undertaking? China's Longyu Caves demonstrate massive underground excavation, but no one documented why. In contrast, Japan's Oyu stone circles include underground elements whose purpose was recorded in later traditions, showing how differently cultures preserved the memory of their subterranean works. In northern Japan, the Oyu stone circles date to around 2000 BC. The circles themselves are impressive, massive arrangements of river stones in precise patterns. But beneath some of them, archaeologists have found underground chambers, suggesting the site was designed in 3 dimensions: sky, surface, and underworld. The site sits in Kazuno, Akita Prefecture, in a region where the late Jomon period saw flourishing cultural development. 2 main circles dominate the landscape: Manza and Nonakado, each approximately 46 to 48 meters in diameter. Stones were carefully selected and positioned, creating patterns visible from ground level, but whose full geometry becomes clear only from above. The labor involved speaks to organized effort sustained over considerable time. Jomon culture, spanning roughly 14,000 to 300 BC, represents one of the world's longest continuous cultural traditions. The people were primarily hunter-gatherers, though with increasingly sophisticated settlement patterns and artistic production. Their pottery, among the earliest in the world, features elaborate cord-marked patterns and flame-like projections. The stone circles at Oyu belong to the later phases of this tradition, when communities had developed complex ritual practices. The underground elements weren't discovered immediately. Surface surveys documented the stone circles, but excavation beneath and around them revealed burial pits and carved chambers. These spaces lie directly below or adjacent to the surface circles, positioned as if the 2 elements were meant to function together. Bodies were interred with grave goods, pottery vessels, stone tools, and jade ornaments that demonstrate both craftsmanship and long-distance trade connections. The chambers themselves are modest compared to some underground structures discussed earlier. Most are small stone-lined pits or cists, just large enough for individual or small group burials. But their positioning beneath the circles suggests intentional connection between the visible monument and the hidden burial space. The dead were placed literally at the foundation of the ritual landscape. Astronomical alignments have been proposed for the surface circles, with certain stone arrangements marking solstice or equinox sunrise positions. If accurate, this would create a site that functioned across multiple dimensions, horizontally across the landscape, vertically from sky to underground, and temporally through the solar year. The Jomon peoples would have created an architecture that embedded their dead within a cosmic framework. Artifacts recovered from excavations include distinctive pottery types specific to the late Jomon period and carved stone objects whose functions remain debated. Some appear ceremonial rather than practical, supporting the interpretation that Oyu served ritual rather than domestic purposes. The site wasn't a settlement, but a ceremonial center where communities gathered periodically. Did Jomon peoples design Oyu to connect earthly stone circles with underground chambers, creating a complete cosmological architecture? Japan's Jomon created connections between surface and underground worlds. But in India, the rock-cut temples of Ellora and Ajanta show that underground architecture could achieve staggering artistic sophistication, entire temples carved from living rock. The Kailasa temple at Ellora, India, is often described as carved from a single rock. That's not quite right. It was carved from a cliff face, but instead of building up, artisans carved down and inward, removing 200,000 tons of rock to create a temple that exists entirely below the original surface level. It's one of humanity's most ambitious underground architectural projects. The scale requires perspective. 200,000 tons equals roughly 100,000 truckloads of stone. All of it was removed by hand, using hammers and chisels, over what must have been decades or perhaps a century of sustained work. The excavation began at the top of the cliff. Workers, cutting downward and outward, slowly revealing the temple's structure from the solid rock. As they descended, the building emerged, towers, courtyards, columns, all carved in place rather than assembled from separate pieces. The temple dates to the 8th century AD, roughly 750 to 850 AD, commissioned by the Rashtrakuta dynasty. It was dedicated to Shiva, one of Hinduism's principal deities, and served as both architectural marvel and active religious site. The carving wasn't random excavation. Every element followed deliberate plans. The proportions of columns, the placement of sculptures, the flow of procession routes through the complex. Ellora itself comprises 34 caves total, representing Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions. Cave temples span several centuries of construction, showing how different religious communities use the same technique of rock-cut architecture across generations. But Kailasa, Cave 16, stands out for sheer ambition. While other caves are essentially carved facades with interior chambers, Kailasa is a freestanding structure existing within an excavated court. Ajanta caves, located about 100 kilometers from Ellora, represent an earlier phase of rock-cut architecture. These 30 caves date from the 2nd century BC through the 6th century AD, serving primarily as Buddhist monasteries and prayer halls. Unlike Kailasa's exterior temple, Ajanta's caves are carved directly into the cliff face, creating interior spaces decorated with elaborate frescoes and sculptures. The paintings at Ajanta survive as rare examples of ancient Indian art. Mineral pigments applied to prepared plaster surfaces show scenes from Buddhist narratives, court life, and everyday activities. The technique, involving multiple layers of plaster and paint, required considerable skill. Many paintings retain their colors after 1,500 years, protected by the cave environment's stable conditions. Both sites demonstrate sophisticated understanding of rock mechanics. Structural failures would have been catastrophic, potentially collapsing ceilings or walls during excavation. The builders had to assess rock quality, plan drainage to prevent water infiltration, and calculate which sections could be safely removed. The engineering knowledge rivaled the artistic vision. What drove Indian artisans to remove hundreds of thousands of tons of rock to create temples that could have been built above ground? Was there sacred significance to carving sanctuaries from the earth itself? India's rock-cut temples show underground architecture as art. But in Ethiopia, at Lalibela, underground churches served active congregations, and some believe they connect to tunnel systems that extend far beyond the known structures. In the mountains of Ethiopia, 11 churches were carved from solid rock in the 12th century. They're connected by trenches and passages, some tunneled, some open to the sky. But local tradition insists there are other tunnels, kilometers of passages connecting the churches to distant monasteries, hidden chambers, and possibly other carved sanctuaries we haven't found. The churches of Lalibela represent one of medieval Christianity's most remarkable achievements. King Lalibela, who ruled from roughly 1181 to 1241, commissioned the complex as a new Jerusalem, a pilgrimage site for Ethiopian Christians unable to reach the Holy Land. The churches aren't built, they're excavated. Workers carve downward from the surface, removing rock to reveal structures that existed as negative space, architecture defined by absence rather than addition. The technique mirrors India's rock-cut temples, though the Ethiopian churches developed independently. Each structure was freed from the surrounding bedrock through top-down excavation, creating freestanding buildings within carved courts. Windows, doors, columns, and roofs all emerge from the continuous stone. The largest, Bet Medane Alam, measures 33 by 23 meters and stands 11 meters tall, entirely carved from a single piece of rock. Known passages connect several churches. Trenches and tunnels allow pilgrims to move between structures, creating a processional route through the complex. Some passages run underground, carved through bedrock. Others are open trenches, creating shadowed walkways beneath the surface level. These verified connections demonstrate that Lalibela's designers conceived the site as an integrated whole rather than isolated structures. Local tradition extends far beyond these documented passages. Stories passed through generations describe tunnel networks stretching kilometers from Lalibela, connecting to monasteries in distant regions. Some accounts mention hidden chambers filled with religious treasures and ancient manuscripts, sealed when enemies threatened and never reopened. Others describe escape tunnels used during medieval conflicts, allowing clergy to flee when the site faced attack. Verification requires archaeological investigation, but Lalibela remains an active pilgrimage destination and sacred site for Ethiopian Orthodox Christians. Excavation and survey work must balance scholarly interest with religious sensitivity. Access to certain areas is restricted during religious festivals and holy periods. Some locations remain off-limits entirely, considered too sacred for archaeological intrusion. Recent surveys using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive techniques have detected anomalies that could represent additional passages or chambers. Some readings suggest voids extending beyond the known tunnel network. Whether these are natural formations, deliberate constructions, or simply irregularities in the rock requires physical investigation that hasn't yet received permission. The legends themselves carry weight in Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. Oral history preserves knowledge across generations, And dismissing local accounts as mere folklore risks losing genuine historical information. Some traditions about Lalibela have proven accurate upon investigation. The question is which stories preserve real memory and which have evolved into legend. How extensive is Lalibela's true underground network? And if the legends are even partially accurate, what other rock-cut sanctuaries might lie beneath Ethiopia's highlands, waiting to be rediscovered? From Ethiopia's sacred chambers to Turkey's refugee cities, from Malta's acoustic temples to China's forgotten caverns, we've descended into tunnels carved across continents and millennia. And the deeper we've gone, the clearer one truth becomes. History isn't just written on surfaces or built toward the sky. It's carved into the earth, hidden in chambers and passages that serve purposes we're still trying to understand. Some were practical: water, storage, defense. Others were sacred, connecting the living world to underworld realms. And many served purposes we may never fully grasp because their builders left no explanation, only the tunnels themselves. The mystery isn't just where all these tunnels lead. It's why humanity, across cultures and millennia, felt compelled to dig down. What called to us from beneath the earth? So, now it's your turn. Which underground mystery fascinates you the most? What do you think drove ancient peoples to create these subterranean worlds? Drop your theories in the comments, and I'll be replying to my favorite ones. Make sure to check out our channel for more videos exploring our hidden past. And as always, until next time, stay curious